Mr. Speaker, I rise today to provide this Honorable House and the people of Bermuda with an update on the work being carried out by the Ministry of Finance. In the first instance, I would like to advise this Honorable House of the latest estimates relating to the 2021-2022 budget arising from the extensive work done to prepare for the audit of the Consolidated Fund. Mr. Speaker, based on the numbers submitted for the audit of the Consolidated Fund, the 2021-22 budget deficit is now projected to be $81 million. This is $44 million, or 35% below the original estimate of $125 million, as presented in the 2021-2022 budget statement. The revenue is projected to be $1.07 billion, $74 million above the original 2021-2022 estimate of $991 million, primarily due to increases in customs duty, stamp duty, civil aviation receipts, payroll tax, and increased revenue from the travel authorization. In relation to current account expenditures, they are now projected to be $945 million, $42 million above the 2021-22 original estimate of $903 million. It should be noted that COVID expenditures are projected to total $37 million, $22 million more than the original estimates, which includes $20 million for the minimum revenue guarantee to Skyport and $10 million for unemployment benefits. Mr. Speaker, interest guarantee management costs are projected to be $133 million, $5 million more than original budget, which most of this increase related to costs for the failed Morgan's Point project, which was guaranteed by the OBA government. Capital account expenditures are projected to be $76 million, $17 million less than originally budgeted. Mr. Speaker, the continued strengthening of the economy is already evident in the first quarter numbers that the Ministry of Finance has received to date. As indicated earlier, the actual revenues in 2021-2022 in certain key areas were higher than originally predicted for that year, resulting in the lower than forecast 2021-2022 deficit. Therefore, it is expected that the loss in income from the aircraft register as a result of the Russia-Ukraine war will be offset by stronger payroll tax, land tax, stamp duty, customs duty, and tourism-related revenue from our stronger than expected tourism season. Mr. Speaker, tourism revenue for the current year is now expected to increase by approximately $30 million above initial estimates. This increase, along with the improvement of the 2021-2022 deficit position, will enable the government to fulfill the promise given in the 2022-2023 budget statement to provide even more relief to the people of Bermuda who have been negatively affected by rising global inflation. Mr. Speaker, this House has already passed relief measures such as increased support for financial assistance, payroll tax rebate for 75% of Bermuda's workers, and support for parents of public school students. Further, we have frozen the price of fuel at February levels, and later today, we will table a bill to eliminate customs duty on essential goods, which will further benefit working families by reducing food prices as this government takes action to deal with rising global inflation. Mr. Speaker, this government will also invest in critical infrastructure to stabilize the Tynes Bay waste-to-energy facility to reduce the risk of landfilling returning to Bermuda. Finally, the Cabinet has approved additional funding to the Bermuda Housing Corporation to address the shortage of affordable housing, which will be detailed by the Honorable Minister of Public Works in this Honorable House next week. Mr. Speaker, despite the relief that this government is giving to working families and the additional investment in housing that is needed after years of underinvestment, it is expected that the government will meet the deficit target of $70 million. When this deficit is combined with the deficit figures from last year, this will see the government's net debt position in a much stronger position than forecast during February's budget presentation. The March 31st, 2022 net debt level was $48 million lower than previously forecast in the budget statement. In addition, as at March 31st, 2023, net debt is now forecast to be $60 million than originally estimated in budget statement projections. Mr. Speaker, the figures that I just mentioned highlights the result of the successful execution of Bermuda's economic recovery plan, which has seen government revenues increase, economic growth that has exceeded expectations, 5.4% in 2021, and the strongest growth in international business since 2007. The successful management of Bermuda's economy has been recognized by external ratings agencies and by investors, as noted from the results of the recent debt refinancing. There will continue to be close scrutiny of the government's revenue and expenditures to ensure that debt and fiscal metrics continue to move in a positive direction. Mr. Speaker, I will now turn to matters related to the refinancing of government's debt. In accordance with Section 2.3 of the Government Loans Act, I'm pleased to inform this Honorable House of a successful capital markets transaction that occurred on the 15th of August 2022 to issue $390 million of additional senior notes due in 2032. Mr. Speaker, honorable members will recall that on the 1st of July 2022, the government issued $500 million of new senior notes due in 2032, which was used to pre-fund an upcoming private placement maturity in December 2022 and to refinance the outstanding senior notes due in January 2023. Mr. Speaker, at that time, global bond markets had seen unprecedented levels of volatility, with interest rates having dramatically increased from record lows. In response to an uncertain market, the government made a key decision to de-risk the transaction by prioritizing its most immediate refinancing needs. As a result, the government took the strategic decision to issue $500 million to address the short-term refinancing needs and to defer the refinancing of the 2024 debt. To refinance that longer-term debt would have required raising almost $1 billion in new capital and would have been offered at higher interest rates, which would have increased Bermuda's interest payments. Mr. Speaker, following the July offering, the Ministry of Finance continued to prudently monitor market conditions for opportunities to target the 2024 notes. Issuance markets continued to improve, U.S. Treasuries and credit spreads narrowed significantly, and in early August, Bermuda's new 2032 senior notes, issued the month prior, were trading at a significant premium to par value. Consequently, on the 15th of August, Bermuda reopened the initial offering and issued an additional $390 million of the same 5% senior notes due in 2032, but at a placement yield of 4.54%, or 54 basis points lower than in July. It also achieved a spread of 175 basis points over U.S. Treasuries, equal to the second lowest spread ever achieved by Bermuda. Demand for the reopening was largely anchored by the same lead investors from the original offering in July, who were supportive of Bermuda's financing strategy and were looking to continue to increase their existing exposure to Bermuda due to our strong economic performance. In addition, we also saw demand from investors who did not participate in the July offering. Mr. Speaker, I will also note that the 10-year U.S. Treasury was at 2.79% at the time of the reopening execution, which was about 1% lower than where rates are today. Additionally, with the notes issued at a premium, the proceeds were sufficient to redeem the approximately $400 million of outstanding notes due in 2024. When combined with the initial issuance, gross debt taking into account the retirement of the upcoming $154 million in notes will actually decline by about $6 million. Mr. Speaker, these latest transactions have allowed the government to fully refinance all of its near-term external debt, with more than 4 years until the next maturity in January 2027. As a result of our management of the country's finances and the successful execution of Bermuda's economic recovery plan, we have not had to utilize the country's sinking fund balance for management of ongoing cash needs to the extent originally projected. Therefore, this gives the option for the government to repay the $50 million in Bermuda dollar debt outstanding next year without having to refinance this debt. This will allow for further reduction in outstanding debt and is positive news. Mr. Speaker, our focus in these matters has been to ensure that Bermuda continues to implement a strong and robust fiscal and debt management strategy. Consistent with this approach has been this government's management and oversight of matters related to government-issued guarantees. Such guarantees have been issued to support sustainable economic growth and to protect the safety, health, and economic well-being of our residents. We have worked closely with Bermuda Hospitals Board, particularly to provide support during the significant challenges that resulted from the COVID-19 pandemic. As a result, relief was provided to the Bermuda Hospitals Board in relation to payroll tax, as well as waivers relating to immigration fees and customs duty. The previous relief on payroll tax and immigration fees expired on August 31, 2022, and has now been extended to March 31, 2023. In addition, the government is working closely with Clarion Bank in relation to the $2.5 million guarantee issued to the Bank for Inno Fund to support the continued growth and development of a tech incubator in Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, the successful execution of this refinancing initiative, coupled with the recent positive assessments by independent ratings agencies, and the strong economic growth which is now taking place through the successful execution of Bermuda's economic recovery plan, reinforces the fact that Bermuda's economy is on the right track. However, Mr. Speaker, too often in Bermuda's history, the story has been purely the health of the balance sheet, or the apparent skill at achieving some measure of fiscal discipline and accounting mastery. Yes, this is important, and it is something with which we must continue to aspire. But, Mr. Speaker, a healthy or improved balance sheet must be used to support the people we represent. It makes no difference to the struggling mother who is working 2 jobs to keep the lights on that the government reduces its deficit unless those savings and better than expected fiscal performance means relief for her and her family. Hard-working Bermudians have had to endure plenty of shared sacrifice, and it is high time that the people benefited from shared success. Mr. Speaker, this government's fiscal performance provides us with the scope to do just that. And as promised in this year's budget statement, relief now and more relief to come, the government will outline further measures to return more funds to working families in the coming weeks, and will keep its promise to ensure that the shared success is not kept by the government, but shared with the hard-working taxpayers of Bermuda to help working families cope with increasing global inflation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.